Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane explaining hard things in easy terms for you here on UATV channel. No other nation desires peace more than Ukraine. That is why we ought to win a just and lasting peace, which will prevent any new genocidal war against Ukrainians in other nations of the world. President Zelensky has proposed a famous peace formula with 10 specific steps, which covers the restoration of nuclear, food and energy security in the interests of the entire international community. For a diplomatic resolution of the war to be successful, the united will of the world is essential.
The peace formula consists of 10 points, from nuclear security to the restoration of the territorial integrity of our state, from energy security to the return of all prisoners of war and deportees held on the territory of Russia. This is now one of the key tasks for our state, to involve the world in concrete implementation of the points of the peace formula. We must return the Ukrainian flag to all cities and communities of Ukraine. We must ensure the real responsibility of the terrorist state for this war, and we must guarantee the safety of all generations of Ukrainians after the end of this war.
However, the West's voice is not enough to solve the global security crisis triggered by Russia's war against Ukraine and guarantee long-term international peace. To achieve this result, the countries of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America must step up and use their weight and influence. Every voice and every country matters, as the UN Charter does not differentiate between big and small states, influential and non-influential ones, champions and outsiders. Those who are earnestly seeking peace should join the consolidated international efforts on implementing the Ukrainian Peace Formula. This formula is designed to be flexible, allowing states to commit only to those elements of the formula which they fully share and take leadership in certain specific areas of peace-building efforts without having to commit to the other elements. Please let us remind you of the 10 steps formula once again. 1. Radiation and nuclear safety. 2. Food security. 3. Energy security. 4. Release of all prisoners and deportees. 5. Implementation of the UN Charter and the restoration of the Ukraine's territorial integrity and the world order. 6. Withdrawal of Russian troops and cessation of hostilities. 7. Justice. 8. Immediate protection of the environment from ecocide. 9. Preventing escalation. 10. Confirmation of the end of the war. Persecution for anti-war positions in Russia continues. No, it was wrong. Not just continues, but gains momentum. It's a level up, or rather said, level down. What does it tell you, dear world, when State Parliament Chairman Volodin responded to PMC Wagner boss Prigozhin's request and instructed as a matter of urgency to develop a law on criminal liability for discrediting the volunteers and fighters of the Wagner PMC? What does it tell you when you hear that a court in Russia has fined journalist who now heads the city historical museum for 30,000 rubles under an article about discrediting the Russian army? The reason for the fine was the picture he posted on Facebook, "No to war." What would you say if I tell you that in Moscow, poets still can read their poems in the middle of a street? Artem Kamardin also read his work, which was about the Donbass militia. Putin's police did not like it, so they searched his home. They pulled out poet's girlfriend's hair, and the poet himself was beaten. Also, the punishers tried to rape the poet with a dumbbell. That's right, a dumbbell. I can't claim that this actually happened. However, after all these testimonies of Ukrainians who survived Russian occupation, I'm ready to believe the poet's story. The Moscow court didn't. Or rather, they referred to a formal check by the investigative committee where they claimed that the use of special equipment during the search was implemented according to the law. That is, an attempt to rape with a dumbbell is all according to the Russian law. And the dumbbell is a special equipment. You know, again, we can't say that this outrageous fact really is the fact. Maybe poet Kamardin is lying. He's currently in a pre-trial detention center and he was never allowed to see doctors, but maybe there was no rape. No dumbbell, for Christ's sake. But what does it tell you, dear world, when a city court approves the actions of punishers because you can't call them police in advance? What does it tell you of the country when it treats lawlessness by legalizing it? What does it tell you about Russia when Rosinform Monitoring, a Putin's watchdog, has included former deputy Ilya Ponomaryov on the list of terrorists and extremists? He had previously been arrested in absentia. So when Putin's punishers will catch him, they will arrest him for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever Prigozhin orders. What does it tell you? Well, if you ask me the same question, I'd answer, there is obviously no greater threat and a fear for Putin than his own nation. I am talking to you, intimidated Russians, that are fleeing all over the world from his crazy imperial ambitions. Putin is afraid of you. Look at these laws. Look at these bunkers, these police guards. Look at all this.
Часть была вынуждена выехать из России.
That part of Russian society that is ready to resist has in fact already been suppressed. Some were forced to leave Russia, some were under repression in prisons, and some were simply silent, because expressing their opinion in Russia could result in long years of imprisonment, and of course in those conditions where a significant part of the population is subject of propaganda, in those conditions where internal searches are carried out, and external enemies, the system of denunciation, it is distributed. In fact, the power warms up all the basest feelings in the population in order to make it easier to control the population.
The world clearly understands Putin's Russia is a threat. You, again, intimidated Russians fleeing all over the world from your mad Tsar's ambitions, Putin is afraid of you. Look at his laws, look at his bunkers, look at these police guards and all these fences, restrictions, political assassinations, and all these chained dogs like Ramzan Kadyrov, and all his huge, swollen from theft and drunkenness, second-in-the-world army, capable of fighting only with living blocks, women and children and power stations, and then threaten the world with a nuclear fire when they lose on the battlefield. The United States recognized the Russian military formation PMC Wagner as a transnational criminal organization. The U.S. Treasury Department reported that additional sanctions were imposed against the group. Due to the group's assistance in the war against Ukraine, the U.S. Treasury froze the assets of the Wagner in the United States. I mean, this is perfect. It was a clever decision, Comrade Prigozhin, to hide your assets in America. Not too patriotic, but thank you anyway. Also, partners of the group and companies that contribute to the military complex of Russia were also sanctioned, a total of 6 individuals and 12 legal entities. Thus, United States law allows imposing sanctions against members and structures of transnational criminal organizations.
As sanctions and export controls on Russia from our international coalition continue to bite, the Kremlin is desperately searching for arms and support, including through the brutal Wagner Group, to continue its unjust war against Ukraine. Today's expanded sanctions on Wagner, as well as new sanctions on their associates and other companies enabling the Russian military complex, will further impede Putin's ability to arm and equip his war machine. Janet Yellen, Secretary of the U.S. Department of the Treasury.
In particular, freezing any assets of the group in the United States and prohibiting American citizens from providing funds, goods or services for sanctioned persons or companies. The United States has previously stated that the so-called Wagner PMC received a batch of weapons from North Korea to strengthen Russian forces in Ukraine, which is a sign of the mercenaries' role expansion in the war. However, the United States believes that the numbers of weapons from North Korea will not change the dynamics of hostilities in Ukraine due to intelligence data. Such a supply is in direct violation of UN Security Council resolutions, however. U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said that the United States shared its intelligence data on the fact that North Korea was supplying weapons to Russia with an expert group, the UN Security Council Committee on Sanctions Against the DPRK. The United States released recently declassified photos of Russian wagons that were heading back and forth from Russia to North Korea in November 2022. That, according to the United States, was the first supply of weapons for the formation of the Wagner PMC. CNN journalists have done a great job and found out how Wagner PMC mercenaries are fighting in Ukraine. During assaults No one takes into account losses. Retreat without order, execution. PMCs are not allowed to take out the wounded during the battle. The squad must advance until its task is complete. Wagnerites are storming in detachments with 10 people, Wagnerites, mercenaries in each. They recon intel on the enemy in real time using reconnaissance drones. The first to attack are inmates, mercenaries recruited in the colonies. Losses in their ranks reach up to 80%. Somebody just wake me up. It is a World War I tactic. And the side that used this tactic during the World War I has lost the war. It's not that Putin does not understand it, no. He just doesn't care. All these Russian mercenaries, inmates, soldiers means nothing to him. What matters to Putin is the power. Absolute, sacrosanct power. Well, here's the world's answer. And that, dear world, is already a victory of unity. Let's bring it further onwards until we, the world, make sure the shock does not pose any threat anymore. It was Henry Keane on the UATV channel explaining hard things in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Stay safe and tuned for more on our Sunday weekly wrap-up. See you there.